Glymphatic system comes in and scoops out those proteins, and that's really probably one of those big causes for it. So that's one of the things that we always want people to understand. But there's also something else that I think is important to maybe talk about, which is on the other side, not sleep apnea side, but on the insomnia side, which is there's a lot of people who go to the drugstore and they buy an over-the-counter sleep aid. Right? Now, I'm not talking about supplementation yet. We can get into supplements in a minute if you want to, but I'm talking about things like the PM medications, right? Here in America, we have them where there's like an analgesic plus a PM. So there's Tylenol PM, Advil PM, and what it is it's a pain reliever, but they add something called diphenhydramine, and it makes you feel sleepy, and it makes you fall asleep. Diphenhydramine is actually an antihistamine, right? So it's used for congestion and things like that. But there's now data to suggest that daily use of the PM part of this, not the pain relieving part, but the PM part, can lead almost directly to Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
Right. So if people can just go to bed and follow a couple simple rules and go to bed naturally, you'd be shocked at how much better your world is going to be.
The Queensland Brain Institute at the University of Queensland found that people with untreated apnea have a 45% higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease.
Like I said.
Which is crazy.
So
it's really important.
Here's the thing is we've got all these people who are watching your show right now. They need to start thinking in their head, like, maybe I have sleep apnea, maybe I don't, but maybe I should take a look at what are some of the symptoms and see if that's something that could be going on for me. Because again, testing is available. And to be clear, it's not like I'm the only guy out there testing people. I mean, there are sleep doctors all over the world that are testing people. My encouragement to people is, hey, figure it out. If you can't figure it out, shoot us an email. We'll find a sleep center for you to go to. But if you think there's something going on, it's definitely worth checking out. Because by the way, you can stay with undiagnosed sleep apnea for your entire life. And all it does is basically break down everything that's going on inside. And that's not what you want. Like, remember, sleep is recovery, right? This is how your body still functions. Like, if you want to lead a nice, prosperous life, you want to sleep.
Insomnia has become a bit of a word that people throw around.
For sure.
Right? They kind of self-diagnose themselves. We kind of think of it as this one specific thing. I think people say I have insomnia when they just don't sleep well.
Right.
What is insomnia and what's the big myth around it?
Yeah. So number one, there's a couple of different flavors of insomnia. There's the I can't fall asleep. There's the I can't stay asleep, which we talked about quite a bit. There's the I wake up too early. And then there's just the I wake up from unrefreshing sleep. So we really think that there are four sort of types of insomnia, right? And when people, I would say some of the biggest myths that a lot of people have surrounding insomnia is, or like the biggest problem that they do is when somebody has a really crappy night, then what they try to do is the next evening go to bed early and try to catch up on some of that sleep that they missed. So to be clear, this is a terrible idea because your circadian rhythm isn't ready to go to bed early. So you lie in bed and you're exhausted, but you can't fall asleep. You're what I call wired and tired, right? And so what we want people to do is if you do have a bout of insomnia where you have difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep, number one, don't over-caffeinate during the daytime. So many people are like, oh, I'm dragging, I got to get a coffee, and they caffeinate, and then they caffeinate so late into the day that they have shitty sleep that night, and now we're in the washing machine cycle going over and over and over. It sounds like you might be relating to this a little bit maybe yourself. And then, so we want to avoid that. The other thing we want to avoid is overstimulation at night, right? So a lot of times people get that nervous energy, and so they're just doing. Again, you need runway to land the plane, so give yourself kind of that space. And then just make sure that you've got some level of regularity. I would argue for my insomnia patients, but quite honestly, for anybody who's watching this, the number one sleep tip that I can give people is to wake up at the same time 7 days a week. Not go to bed. I don't actually care when you go to bed that much. I know there's a lot of sleep specialists out there who are like, you got to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. I'm not of that ilk. I don't really care that much about the going to bed time. I really only care about the wake up time. Let me explain why. When you wake up in the morning, sunlight hits your eye and you have a special cell in your eye called a melanopsin cell, which sends a signal to your brain to turn off the melatonin faucet in your head. But it sets a timer for exactly 14 hours later. It's called the melatonin phased response curve. So if you're waking up at 6, melatonin turns off until about 8 p.m. Then it takes about a couple hours for it to get up and in. So then you start to get sleepy around 9:30 and you go to bed. But if you did that and now it's Saturday and you sleep in until 8, Melatonin doesn't kick off until 10 Saturday night. So what I'm saying is the time that you wake up directly determines when your internal melatonin kicks into gear. So if everybody woke up at the exact same time every single day, 7 days a week, automatically you would get tired at the right time and you would start going to sleep.
And is there two different types of insomnia? Sometimes I hear primary, secondary insomnia. I think I heard that on your YouTube channel.
So when you look at primary insomnia versus secondary insomnia, the way we categorize that, secondary insomnia is usually due to something else that's going on in your life.
Psychology.
So maybe caffeine abuse, right? Maybe something along those lines. Whereas primary insomnia is there's nothing else. The only thing you've got going on is sleep disorder. Another example of something where insomnia might be secondary would be pain. Right. So if you have a pain syndrome, if you have fibromyalgia or low back pain that could prevent you from sleeping, that would be secondary insomnia, secondary to pain.
And I hear that the most common treatment for insomnia is CBT therapy?
So yes and no.
Okay.
So I would say that the most common therapy for insomnia is alcohol. More people drink themselves to sleep than any other single thing out there. And then you start to get into the pharmacy of it all. And there's a lot of pharmaceutical drugs out there that people utilize for sleep. And I want to make a point, if I can, is there's nothing wrong with needing a pill to sleep. Okay, I want to be very clear about this. There are people out there who need pills, right? All kinds of different ones. Thank you. There's a whole host of reasons why you and your doctor may have come to the conclusion that a sleeping tablet is good for you. The problem comes when those sleeping tablets are overprescribed. So insomnia is in the sleep world, we call it a door handle diagnosis, because when the doctor has their hand on the door and they're just about to leave, that's when the patient says, oh, and by the way, I'm not sleeping. And then the doctor usually pulls out the prescription pad and says, Ambien or Trazodone or something like that, writes it up, says, here, come back in 30 days. Well, you haven't really done anything for this person. You've handed them a pill. And by the way, now they're probably either psychologically or physiologically addicted to said pill, right? Now, once again, if you've got a major mental health issue, I don't think I care. I think it's okay for you to have your Ambien and be fine.
And a lot of people that do have insomnia have depression.
Oh, I think it's one of the biggest things that we see. But I would argue anxiety might be a little bit more than depression. But yes, anxiety and depression, I would argue, make up 75% of insomnia at any given time, right? I work with people and I do something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which you correctly identified as CBTI, right? And so I work with patients all the time. And that's exactly what we do is we reschedule them. So that's the behavioral part. And then the cognitive part is we talk to them about how do you think about sleep? Because a lot of people think about sleep in disastrous ways. They're like, if I don't get 8 hours, my whole day is screwed and everything's going to happen. It rarely happens that way. Like it's called catastrophizing. You just make it worse and worse and worse. And so we look at those cognitive distortions and we help fix them in therapy by really kind of what I call doing the math. And so I say, well, have you ever had 4 hours of sleep? Yes. Did you do something terrible the next day? No. So where's your evidence? Right? And you start to get people to challenge themselves and all of a sudden they can kind of get there. There's also another area of that a lot of people go to somewhere in between the pills and therapy, and that's supplementation. So there's a lot of people out there who like to use supplements and try to understand how to fix, quote, their insomnia with supplementation. So if we can, let's talk a little bit about supplements and sort of what's good and what's bad.
What is the difference between a supplement and a pill? Or is it you talking about the same thing here?
So under the context of this conversation, a supplement is a non-FDA regulated thing that you can purchase at any drugstore. And a pill is a by prescription only from a doctor.
Okay.
That's how we're going to make the distinction for this particular conversation.
Okay. So those pills that are in front of you
there.
So
right in front of me, these are actually all supplements. So these are different things. So these are not pharmaceuticals. These are different things. So we've got...
I mean, in different countries, it's different, right?
Great point. So let's talk about melatonin since that's kind of the biggie that a lot of people like to know about. So number one, melatonin is by prescription only almost everywhere other than the United States, right? So in England, in Australia, in Europe, you can't just walk into the drugstore and buy melatonin. And there's a reason. A lot of people don't realize it, but melatonin is a hormone. There's a reason you can't go to the CVS and get testosterone and estrogen, right? Because hormones affect the entire system. They affect almost 300 different things in your body. So what you don't want to do is have somebody just willy-nilly grabbing a hormone and starting to pop it without somebody understanding what's going on with them. More importantly, melatonin in particular, and the point I wanted to make earlier about depression, melatonin interacts with all SSRI medication. An SSRI is a serotonin-specific reuptake inhibitor, an antidepressant. So things like Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, all of those are medications that will be affected by melatonin ingestion, and nobody knows that it is. In addition, melatonin affects birth control. Yes, you heard it here. Birth control. It affects blood pressure medication and it affects diabetes medication. So one of the problems is that people go into the local drugstore and they're like, I'm going to grab some melatonin and I'm going to make my sleep better because I'm sleeping poorly. So first of all, that's not what melatonin does. Melatonin is a sleep regulator, not a sleep initiator. Melatonin doesn't affect sleep drive. Melatonin affects sleep rhythm. So remember in the beginning of our conversation, we're talking about the two systems. Melatonin only affects your brain telling it when it's time to go to bed. It does not make you sleepy. That's adenosine. We already talked about adenosine and caffeine and how similar their molecular structures are. So when you look at something like melatonin, you need to really be thoughtful about using it. Number two, melatonin is not to be used in children, okay? So a lot of people are like, Michael, I've got pediatricians all over the country telling me to give my children melatonin. I'm gonna say it right here in front of everybody. That is the dumbest idea I have heard in a long time, because you just taught your child that they need a pill to sleep. Normally, no child needs pills to sleep. And by the way, most children make almost 4 times the amount of melatonin that their brain even needs. So giving them extra melatonin doesn't do you any good. There is, however, one group of children where melatonin does work well, and that's in kids on the autism spectrum. We don't know exactly why, but or at least I don't, but there is data to suggest that at 5, 6, 7 milligrams, that can be very helpful for them. Dosage also is a problem. Like if you go to the drugstore, you almost can't find it in the appropriate dose. The appropriate dose is anywhere from about 0.5 milligram to 1.5 milligrams. Maybe top out at 3, but that's about as high as you want to go. But when you go to CVS, you find the gummies in 10 and 20 milligrams. And people tell me all the time, I can't take melatonin, it gives me crazy dreams. Number one side effect of overdosing on melatonin is crazy dreams.
On this point of going to a supermarket and picking some melatonin off the shelf, FDA approval and the lack of FDA approval in melatonin means that there's less clarity on what's actually in there, right?
That's exactly right.
I was reading about a study in 2024 where they looked at different melatonins that were found on the shelf.
And they found very different things inside the bottle.
Very, very different things. They looked at an analysis of melatonin gummies marketed for children and found that the actual amount of melatonin ranged from 0% to 667% of what was listed on the label.
Yep, see it all the time.
And in the same study, some melatonin gummies contained absolutely no melatonin, while others contained hazardous contaminants like CBD that were not disclosed on the label.
Yep.
Because melatonin is sold as a supplement in the US and not a drug, the FDA does not test it for safety or accuracy before it hits the shelf.
You are 100% correct. And that's a huge problem. Just think about that for a second. I mean, the market for melatonin is tremendous. It's huge in the supplement world, yet there's no regulation whatsoever. Nobody knows about these interaction effects, which are big, big, big. And by the way, most people are using it wrong. There's really only 3, maybe 4 different instances when melatonin would be useful. I would use melatonin for jet lag, and we should talk about jet lag. I would use melatonin for shift workers, right? So for people who work, night shift, who have to sleep during the daytime, they would be excellent people to use melatonin. People with a melatonin deficiency, a lot of people don't think about that, but right around age 50 is when, if you're going to have a melatonin deficiency, we start to see that happening for people. Their ability to produce melatonin begins to decline. So I think those 3 situations absolutely would be on board for melatonin. Believe it or not, there's some data to show that in ADD and ADHD, there's some use for melatonin, and then also for a very specific sleeping disorder called REM behavior disorder.
We're going melatonin crazy as a society, aren't we?
Absolutely. We don't need it. It's completely unnecessary.
I was looking at the data. In 1999, 0.4% of Americans said they used melatonin. Today, it's almost 30%. So about 70 million Americans.
Up.
That's crazy.
Dude, that is problematic. And again, they have no idea what it's doing to them, right? And they're giving it to their kids. Like, I can't think of anything worse for a young female developing body than to add a contraceptive when it's not necessary. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
The rise in children overdosing on sleep gummies is the fastest growing trend in poison control data.
Yeah, I think it's like almost 600% increase or something crazy like that for kids who have who've overdosed on melatonin. Like there was a study that came out maybe a year and a half ago, showed like almost 600% of increase in overdosages for kids. Like, that's pretty messed up when you start to think about it. And here's the thing, kids know how to sleep, right? You just got to stop. You just got to let them sleep, right? You got to give them some parameters. Here's when you go to bed. Here's when you wake up. Don't get out of bed. Don't come in and ask for 12 glasses of water. All the stuff that goes on there. I mean, this isn't hard.
So when and how? So I used melatonin once in my life.
Okay.
And I've got to be honest, it fucking worked.
Yeah. Oh, if you use it right, it works, bro.
And it was actually about a week ago because I'd been struggling with lots of jet lag. I'd flown from the UK to LA to UK to LA to Cape Town to the Middle East to wherever. And I was getting to bed every night at like 4 or 5 a.m. and still waking up at, having to wake up at about 10. So I thought, I need to correct this.
Yes,
it's been going for 2 weeks and I need to correct this.
Absolutely.
So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to cave. I took the melatonin and corrected it.
Yes, it does. So let's talk about jet lag. So it's a bit of a story, but I got involved with a company that has got an app, which is very interesting, okay? I don't have any, I'm not invested in the company, just to be clear, but it's one of my close friends who developed this. So I'm kind of a space nerd.
It's not Time Shifter.
It is Time Shifter.
Oh, really?
It is.
I would
Time
also
Shifter.
like an affiliation with Time Shifter because
No
I
problem.
use them. Yeah.
Yeah, I will get you that. So here's what's fascinating is the way the whole Time Shifter started was, so aren't you kind of a space guy? Like, aren't you interested?
I'm an investor in SpaceX and
Okay, so I'm a space nerd myself, right? So the ISS is moving around at 17,500 miles an hour around the Earth. It's cooking.
ISS meaning the International Space Station.
Yeah, it's whipping around, right? Can you imagine how many sunrises and sunsets they get in a given day?
I don't know. How many?
Every 2 hours. So they basically get 12.
Wow.
Think about how messed up their circadian rhythms would be from seeing the sun rise and seeing it go and seeing it gets really messed up, right? And by the way, you don't want to make big mistakes in the space station. Like, you don't leave the airlock open, or shit like that. Like, that's when things get really, really bad. So they called down to NASA and they were like, hey, we got a problem up here. Everybody wants to use the lab at the same time. Like, people are seeing the sun. Like, what's going on? So they called a buddy of mine named Stephen Lockley over at Harvard. Stephen is arguably one of the best circadian researchers in the world. Super smart dude. And he was like, well, let's send up a lighting kit and let's create shifts on the space station. Right? So that's exactly what they did. So they set up a lighting kit. I think it was on the Columbia shuttle before it got decommissioned. And they set up lighting and then they set up timing for lighting. And so there was a morning shift, a mid shift, and a night shift for the astronauts. Once they got the algorithm working, they brought it down terrestrially and they put it into the Mercedes-Benz Formula One race car team. So they gave it to Lewis Hamilton, right? Because when you think about it, think about what he has to do, right? He's on or off the podium on hundredths of a second. Right? And he's in a different country every 3 weeks, right? So this guy's got jet lag like you wouldn't believe. And so once we were able to get it going there, then we created the Time Shifter app. And so it's an app, you can get it on your phone. And what you do is you put in your flight number and it automatically pulls up the flight and knows where you are. This is why I think that jet lag is a math problem. Let me explain. We learned about 20 years ago that when you take a certain frequency and intensity of light and you shine it in somebody's eyes, you can move their circadian rhythm by about 8 hours if you want to.
Their circadian rhythm again being
that internal biological clock, the times when your body wants to go to bed and wants to wake up. We can actually move that by about 8 hours with about 10,000 lux, which is the brightness level of a blue light, particular frequency of light, okay? So when you hit that, if you start in LA and you're going to Manchester, right? And there's a big time difference and you know what time it is in LA and you know what time it is in Manchester, it's a math problem of when do you get the light. So that's what Time Shifter is it determines when do you need that light. And then on the times when you don't need light, it has you use caffeine, right? Or to keep you awake, or if it's time to sleep, then you use a little bit of melatonin. That's when melatonin becomes so valuable.
It also tells you when to eat.
It does. It tells you all of these different things. And it's kind of nice because it kind of shows up on your phone. It's like, hey, do this then, do this then. And it works really, really well. But yeah, Time Shifter is one of my favorites. I've been using it literally for 15 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And it solves jet lag, bro. Like, we're going to fix that for you. No question.
How often should someone be having melatonin? Is there like too often? Because some people literally have it every day.
Yeah, I would argue it's a bad idea. So if you have a melatonin deficiency, sure, have it every day. But or if you're a shift worker, probably. But I use it only for jet lag myself. Otherwise, I'm not using it on the regular.
And what's the risk there of having it every day? Is it?
It's a good question. So when you start to look at melatonin overdose and you start to look at melatonin on board for long periods of time, there's been some conflict in the research. There's a group of people that say if you stay on melatonin for extended periods of time, your body stops producing it. There's another group of people that have looked at research and have said, actually, that's not the case. So right now we have studies that lead out to about a year or so on melatonin. And when you stop their melatonin production after they've been taking it for a year, their body seems to start back up, no problem. It's different than testosterone, right? So with testosterone, we know that when men start taking testosterone, their body actually stops producing it. With melatonin, that does not appear to be the case, but we don't have studies that go out past, that year long. And so if somebody's been taking melatonin every day for 5-10 years, you kind of start to wonder what's going to happen. Also, don't forget that melatonin is different than the melatonin that's actually produced in your head.
I think it was Andrew Huberman, who I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago, that was saying about not giving kids an overdose of melatonin. And I think afterwards I was doing some research on it, and I read something that said it has an impact on puberty potentially.
So in high dosages, melatonin is a contraceptive.
So that would pause puberty?
Exactly. Or change it.
Okay.
And ways we may or may not know. So I agree with Andrew on that point that, again, melatonin is not something that kids need unless you've got kids on the spectrum, which is, again, where I find it to be helpful. And I've treated kids with that before. But generally speaking, I don't put melatonin on anybody under the age of 18.
Am I more likely to have nightmares if I'm having lots of melatonin?
If you're overdosing, you are.
Why?
So the number one side effect of a high dose of melatonin is super vivid dreams and then eventually nightmares.
Why?
I'm not really sure. If I was garnering a guess, then what I would say is that part of the reason why that you have crazy vivid dreams from melatonin is because it probably does put you into REM sleep a little bit quicker than you normally would and might keep you there a little bit longer. I don't have any data to support that, so I want to be clear. This is more of a hypothesis on my end, but that might make intuitive sense to me.
Just on a quick search.
Sure.
You're right. It says it keeps you in REM sleep a little bit longer and more intensely.
There you go.
This leads to highly vivid dreams or night terrors, which paradoxically makes you wake up feeling more exhausted.
Right. I can't count the number of people who tell me, I need to go back to sleep because I'm so exhausted from my dreams.
Oh, wow.
Right?
So let's finish off on these supplements then.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about melatonin, which, like I said, select usage. A couple of other ones that we've got here, one of them is valerian, right? So when we talk